Welcome, everybody. My name is Giancarlo, based out of Toronto. I am a global education advisor, as well as the executive director and co-founder of Catalyst. And what we do at Catalyst is we convene government officials, school system leaders, and school leaders across the globe on a variety of different topics. And we do it in a unique way where it's less about knowledge transmission and it's more about knowledge construction. And of course, we always need some experts to prime us with insights and of course to be along the way to give us their perspective and their lenses. And you are in for a treat today because we have Genein Letford and Meghan Gardner, who I'll introduce in a moment. That will be our experts here today. And the topic is, oh my goodness, is it ever a topic that is on the forefront of many of our minds across the globe? And we're delighted to engage you in a conversation around all things around integrating cultural education into schools. And what we'll be doing throughout the session today is engaging in a dialogue. We'll be sharing some of the pain points related to integration of cultural education into schools, but also starting to talk about and share with each other how we might start doing it within the environments that we find ourselves in. So with that, I'm going to start off by introducing some of our guests and our experts that are with us today. They're going to lead this discussion. And we're going to start off by Meghan Gardner. If you haven't had the pleasure of meeting Meghan Gardner yet, CEO of Gardner Ventures is a company that specializes in culturally relevant story-based programs, as well as program design and consulting for summer camps, for schools, for education organizations, as well as entertainment companies. You might know one of the companies that she does some work for, which is Carnival Cruise Lines. So if your kids have ever experienced some of those programs, you got to thank Meghan and her team for that. As well as she's a recurring guest lecturer at Harvard's Graduate School of Education. So Meghan, welcome.
Thank you, Giancarlo. It's actually Royal Caribbean, but that's
okay.
Royal
Caribbean. Oh my goodness, my
bad. That's okay. I'll plan on getting Carnival on board eventually.
There you go. I'm forecasting into the future.
That's right. That's right. So basically what our company does is we create educational adventures based around cultural stories. And in doing that, what we do is we hire on cultural educators to consult with us about our stories, to make sure that we're presenting their stories, either historical, mythological, legendary stories, in a way that's culturally sensitive. And so we actually do this in both an online type of format, but also live in a very theatrical environment where there's costumes and props and there's this adventure that the kids go on. And the cultural consultant has to approve of all of our props, our costumes, the language we use, the characters we're exploring, the stories we're exploring. They essentially make sure that everything that we're presenting is appropriate for that culture. And through my frustration of not being able to find enough cultural educators to work with me, my company created culturaled.net, which is a database that right now is in collection phase, but we are actually enlisting cultural educators and centers from around the world to come into this database and put in their information so that they can be found by schools and museums and movie industry to basically hire them to do consulting for them to make sure that their cultures are being appropriately represented. So that's a bit about me, and on to my good friend Janine.
All right, and let me do a little introduction of Janine, folks. If you haven't met Genein Letford, founder of Cafe Intercreative Strategies, and they train leaders and employees to unleash innovative thinking while building inclusive environments. And she's a pioneer in the field of intercultural creativity, is also a national award-winning educator, best-selling author, global speaker on the creative and intercultural competencies as well. So you're in for a treat today, folks. Also veteran TED speaker and top creativity trainer, and also make sure that she shares her insight on all things producing inclusive ideas for the classrooms and the workspaces. And of course, she's certified in intercultural development inventory assessment and delivers one-of-a-kind interactive training as well on intercultural creativity for different organizations. And the new book that's out, 7 Gems of Intercultural Creativity, and that came out in the spring, I think, of this year, if I'm not mistaken. So super excited, Janine, that you're here. And Janine, tell everybody a little bit more about yourself.
I'm just really excited to be here. This is the decade of culture. So I'm excited to see what's going to come out. Excited to share what I have for you just to give people more a foundation to work in this area for themselves and for their classrooms.
Fantastic. So here's what we're going to be doing. We're going to start off, we're going to hear from Meghan. It's going to share a little bit about why this topic is important. We're also going to hear from Janine, who's going to define a little bit more about what it is for us. That's going to lay a foundation for us to then have a discussion. And the discussion is going to be centered around you and others that are in the room. We're going to start off with what are the challenges that we have integrating cultural making our classes more culturally relevant, and then we're going to get into what are strategies that we can do to help curb those challenges. That's going to be the flow. It's going to be very dialogue centric. So fix your hair and have your microphone ready, because we're going to be having discussions. And then, of course, all the key sections will be recorded. A synthesis will be produced, and we'll pass that over to all of you that are here live, but also those that weren't able to join us. And of course, there's those that are interested in this topic that didn't even know about this. It'll be posted to the social so that others can take advantage of this value as well. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Meghan, who's going to kind of prime us a little bit on, why is this so important? Why do we have to keep attuned to it? So over to you, Meghan.
Sure. And I'm going to just start and then pass it on to Janine. But from my perspective, working in education, and I should kind of clarify that my specialty is out of school education, so called informal learning, the learning that happens in after school programs, summer camps, and summer school, et cetera, even in the workplace. And it's actually a universal concept that if people who are trying to learn don't have a sense of belonging inside of the learning environment, they're not going to be able to learn. I mean, they may get some small smattering that they'll be able to sort of, I hate this, I mean, I think an accurate term, regurgitate back to you, but they're not going to truly absorb the concepts and especially be able to have transfer where those ideas are coming from the classroom, from the learning environment into their life to be applicable. So a lot of my work and why I've pursued involving cultural educators is because we wanted to make sure that all of the kids in our adventures felt included. And so that in doing so, what we did was we took a look at our demographic and said, look, we have more than just kids, your typical white kid with history about George Washington and everything. We wanted to make sure that we were bringing in cultural stories that were representative of the history and the lineage of all of the children. So in doing so, what we realized was there was a lot more interest and activity and transfer that was happening from the kids in the classroom because they felt like, wow, this is pertinent to me. And the other neat thing, of course, is when you expose other kids to this different perspective, they're actually going to feel not just the sense, it's not just that this is, I'm in this classroom and this what this person's talking about is not my history. It's also, oh, that's cool. That's like what my history is like. So they start to see these commonalities. And through that commonality, that despite these differences, we have these commonalities. That's what creates a sense of belonging. So that's speaking from my experience, and Janine can put a whole lot more words around exactly why that is. Off to you, Janine.
Meghan, you are amazing. And I'm so just empowered by the work that you do out of school, because it's very complementary to the work that we do in school, of course. And I want to ask you, where were you in the year 2000? Because I was at UCLA jumping in and out of MRI machines as the healthy subject for just, experiments for the professors. Because in the 90s, the MRI was invented and it started to show us what was going on in the brain. And all of my work is backed up by brain research. And that's basically why we're here, because we're getting so much information now that we're 20 years after the invention of the MRI of what's going on in our students' brains and why this topic is so critical right now. I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to show you a little bit about intercultural creativity and its connection to the classroom and culturally relevant education. We're spearheading the term intercultural creativity. World Economic Forum said creativity is now the #1 skill needed in the workforce. Not me, World Economic Forum said that. And our job as educators is to get our kids ready for a life well lived and for the workforce. And so if creativity is needed, we have to understand what's going on in the brain for that. But the kicker is, number one, people don't understand what creativity is. Half the folks think it's singing and dancing, so they're saying they're not creative because they can't sing and dance, and other people just think they're not creative, period. So we are redefining creativity. Creativity is the process of problem finding and problem solving with relevance, value, and novelty. Once again, creativity is the process of problem finding and problem solving with relevance, value, and novelty. And the key word there is relevance. Relevance. Creativity is something that is relevant to you. And that's why this topic today is so important. But when you look at intercultural creativity, there's that cultural aspect to it. And I want to broaden your definition of culture. When you hear culture, you normally just think of ethnicity or nationality, but a culture is just a group of people with an agreed upon set of values, beliefs, and systems. So you can have a soccer mom culture or a tech culture. There's just ways that they do things. But for today, we're mostly talking about ethnic culture and those types of areas. But culture can span so many different areas. You can have a work culture, an organizational culture. And so basically what Meghan said is that cultural awareness, that connectivity is directly linked to your ability to have an inclusive culture, an inclusive environment, and an inclusive classroom. So intercultural creativity is the process of problem finding and problem solving with relevance, value, and novelty with people with different lived experiences. And so cultural competence is the ability to have cultural self-understanding and other understanding. And so as we look at the task today of seeing different strategies of having culturally relevant education, these are the two aspects that we have to be aware of that are key factors in us being successful for our pedagogy and our students being successful there. So what does success look like? Culturally relevant education that delivers our students to be creative with the content that's relevant to them. Because we don't see things as we are, we see things, we don't see things as they are, we see things as we are. And I want to bring up a point that a lot of us have not really considered as educators, that our cultural lens affects the way that we see the world, and it also affects the way that we see the content and our students. You really need to think about that as we move forward. So as you see from this slide, the intercultural competence is your capacity to shift perspective and behavior based on commonalities and differences by experiencing different cultures and individuals with greater level of complexity. So educators who work on their cultural competence are able to see their students with greater levels of complexity and the curriculum with greater levels of complexity that will give us better strategies to find ways to make our classroom culturally relevant. What a lot of people don't know, let me make this a little bit bigger, what a lot of people don't know is that cultural competence is actually a developmental process. Just like you would never put a 5-year-old in a trigonometry class because, developmentally they're not there yet. You would never say to that 5-year-old, you'll never be in a trig class. You just say that there's certain things that you'll have to do to developmentally get ready for that position. Cultural competence is the same way. There's some people who have had a lot of exposure during their formative years of just being around different cultures, being around different systems, being able to adapt and see, and they received that type of exposure. And there's some people who did not receive that type of exposure. They were mostly in a monocultural environment during their formative years, and they really did not have access and exposure to different types of belief systems, values, and different ways that people live their lives. And so what the IDI shows you, and it's actually an assessment that my company administers, it shows you where you are on the continuum. It actually shows you that there is a continuum and that different people are at different places. And so there's some people who may miss difference. They're unable to see the complexity. There's some people who may judge difference right away. There's a lot of work on bias, unconscious belief systems, and just the way that we see this. So we talking about this in the workforce, but the conversation has to come to the classroom because we're human. If you have a brain, you have a bias, you have cultural lenses going on. And so for us to see, are we more in a monocultural mindset, or are we in the middle, or are we in the intercultural mindset? And how is that affecting my ability to see the curriculum and to see and interact with my students? And the last thing I want you to be aware of is that your cultural mindset, your orientation affects your ability to apply the 7 gems. This is something that my company produced, our framework called the 7 gems of intercultural creativity. Your ability to grow your cultural competence and to be able to look at the curriculum in a certain way is the same cognitive processes of your ability to be more creative. Your students' ability to interact with the culturally relevant curriculum, those cognitive processes to get stronger in that area are the same cognitive processes to grow their creative thinking. And really quick, I'll go through them, that your cultural lenses affect your mindset, your growth and fixed mindset. That's based off the work of Carol Dweck. Your cultural lenses affect your way to be empathetic. Children learn from people they connect with and that they like. To be empathetic is a huge asset for an educator to have. Your lenses affect your ability to observe what you see, what you miss. Affects your ability to be curious, which is a huge driver of creative thinking. Affects your ability to perspective shift. It's something that Meghan alluded to. People who are culturally competent are able to shift perspectives more fluently with different cultural situations. It affects your ability to adapt authentically, and it affects your ability to be that connector. And as educators, we want to work on us being bridges, being that connection between different cultural situations, because we have students with different cultural backgrounds that we need to connect with. So I want to, I'll stop sharing my screen there. Let me see there, there we go. So I want to end my time just kind of priming you with this, with saying that our self-awareness of our cultural orientation and our advancement in our work on our culturally minded orientation directly affects our ability to be successful with making our classrooms and our curriculum more culturally relevant for the success of our students. So the last question I want to end with is, what does success look like for our students? What does success look like? And I believe for me, and Meghan, please chime in if you want to add anything else, but for me, it's for our students to see themselves in the curriculum, to see other experiences in the curriculum, not just the main dominant voices, but to see other experiences in the curriculum, and to be able to take that content and take those experiences and be creative. And something that Meghan taught me, which she's very eloquent in saying, is, and to transfer it into their world lived experiences, because we need students who are our future workforce to be able to have transfer and to culturally live their experiences and to connect with people with different lived experiences. What does that look like in our classroom?
Oh, what a wonderful priming for us and getting our mindset for it. Meghan, I'll have you, if you want to react or respond to anything that was shared, feel free to do so. But, I think what I'm thinking in my mind is it really starts with ourselves, right? And our understanding, and depending on what role we're in. So am I an educator in the classroom? Am I a school administrator? Am I the person that does the curriculum? Am I overseeing a variety of different schools? Who am I myself? What have been my experiences and my lived past experiences that kind of frame and shape my cultural competence? And then being self-aware of that, I think, is where the step that we first need to start before we start thinking about what we might be able to enable or enact in others. So what a great way to kick us off. And so Meghan, any reactions to that? And then what we're going to go into next is we're going to have folks introduce themselves, because we're going to get into a discussion, and where we're going to start is the challenges and the current pains that we are all feeling, but we want to make sure we all get to know one another as well. So Meghan, I'm going to hand the mic to you, and then we'll do some introductions of folks that are in the room so we get to know one another. So Meghan, reactions and responses.
Yeah, well, I thought it was really interesting, Janine, when you were covering that the very first step of course, is ignorance. You're not seeing the difference, and it kind of it brought to mind the number of people I've heard often saying, well, I'm colorblind. It's like, I'm sorry. Okay. If you are colorblind, then you are actually not recognizing the beautiful array of differences that are available by this diverse group of people. And therefore, we kind of got to get you to let go of that idea before we can start exploring those differences and what the advantages of having those differences are. Also, you had in that arrow, which I think is an amazing image, that there's judgment of the, so it goes from like ignorance to judgment. Is that what it is?
Yes, it goes to yes.
Ignorance, then judgment, and then what was the next one? Was
then minimization, which means you're minimizing the difference. So yeah, I don't see color.
I don't see color. Got it. So now we're into the I don't see color. You see it, but you're saying I don't see it. And then we've got to reach to a point where we start to actually are able to discuss it and open. Right. Thank you. Right. Minimization. Right. Judges it, then minimizes it. Then we have an acceptance of it. It's not until we have that acceptance that we have that adaptation. So what I like about this, and what I think is going to be interesting for us to explore as a group, is that it is not easy to institute this into a classroom, and you will get pushback. I just want to kind of put that out there, because for anybody who's in now or watching later, they've got to have that mindset and understand you will get pushback. And that's covered in a topic I'm going to cover later on with Dr. ABC, where he says it takes moral courage for you to actually explore the people who are being excluded from the system. And because when you do that, you are defying the system. So you will get pushback. And that part of this challenge is not just how you traverse this whole beautiful journey here. It's also how you're going to handle that pushback. So yeah. So anyway, that's my only point on that.
All right, this is a great segue, because we already started talking about, and I've heard some of the challenges that exist in trying to do this. So let's start off by getting to know one another. Let's get into the next area, which is around challenges. Now, we started mentioning some of them already, but let's dive into them a little bit deeper. We're going to I'll be capturing some of the highlights of what we should be thinking about when we think about the challenges. And what I'm going to do is in the chat as well, for those of you that are watching, you can share your perspective and your lens from your own lived experience, or something that you might be going through right now. And for those of you watching this later on, I want you to do this exercise, which is think about, and hit pause on this video, and I want you to think about, what are the challenges on making all classes more culturally relevant? And you heard some of them already, but I want you to do the exercise on your own, because it's important that we first understand kind of what is stopping us. Like, where are we right now? Where would we like to get to? And you heard what some of the successes look like, but what's in the way for you? And it's understanding what those things are that we'll be able to then circumvent them. So I want to throw it back to Janine and Megan. What have you noticed are some of the challenges that you have seen, maybe you have experienced yourself, when supporting or working, Megan, even the programs that you create, in trying to make, classes or the experiences a lot more culturally relevant? We heard some of them already, but let's start with these challenges. So who would like to go first? Who would like to start us off?
I'll jump in.
All right.
So I had wonderful 15 years within the classroom, just so people know my background a little bit as far as K-12. And then I started a nonprofit for 6 through 12. And then I also taught at the university level at California State University, Northridge. But in my initial experiences, I am an African-American person, as you can see, but I worked north of Los Angeles in the San Fernando Valley, and the predominant culture there. There's many different cultures, but the group is predominantly Latinx. And so my challenge was, once again, as you saw on the continuum, or my gems, is the perspective shifting. I am a creative person naturally. That's the way I was raised, but to be intentionally creative in the classroom with with the particular goals in mind, I had to do some extra work there. And so gratefully, I was at a wonderful school that supported this. Number one, environment, school environment, authority, leadership, their tone is really important if they're going to support this type of work. But they even had a grant that allowed teachers to do home visits. And so, we had to choose three kids. And then one of the three kids who may have been struggling in some areas, and to go and just make that connection, just see what their lived experience was, make that connection with the family. When I got married, my husband said, "Wow, Janine, I know so much about you because I met your mom." I'm like, "Oh, that makes sense now." So when you meet the family, you get more information about your student and structures and belief systems. And so doing home visits was really key for me. But like that one student said, like, "Why are you just visiting these three students just because, they're struggling? I'm doing well. Why don't I get my teacher to come home to my," and that really hit me in a certain way. So I did a home visit for every one of my students, and the families that I serve, they love to feed you. So I also gained like 5 to 10 pounds. But for my work, it was great because of my creative mind. Now I got to see my students in their home. I got to see what they were playing with, what they were watching, their family dynamic. And so when I brought my curriculum in, my brain was already making those connections, and I could speak in my lesson time, bringing in those connections automatically that I saw and I experienced firsthand.
So I would say, one of the challenges would be, I think, not if I'm an educator, if I'm an administrator, how do you go about asking your staff to, hey, start getting to know your students and their families, and I think in a lot of especially strongly unionized education sectors, that could be a challenge, right? Asking teachers to kind of go above and beyond to go and do the visits. That's not even allowed in some jurisdictions. So I think the first challenge is, if I'm an administrator or system leader, it's how do I get my staff to start creating opportunities to really get to know who these kids are, to really get to know the families that the kids come back into. And if I'm an educator, it's what are the opportunities that I can create, even if I don't feel comfortable going into the homes or doing those connections, but what are the opportunities I can create to get to know each child, to get to know the context that they go into. So I think that's a wonderful example. Meghan, other thoughts or experiences on your end?
Yeah, I know we're not at the point of providing solutions, but I can't help it. So I just have to bring up Dr. ABC in this sense. So Dr. ABC, there's a podcast. It's called Better Leaders, Better Schools by Daniel Bauer. And if you're not following it, you need to follow it. And go back to the previous season and look up Dr. ABC, Dr. Andrew B. Campbell. So yes, he actually just happens to have the initials of ABC. And he does reading for kids who don't know how to read. They're in the advanced grades and they don't know how to read. And I'll go into this in more detail, but one thing he did that I thought was brilliant was he had the parents come into the classroom. And he had the kids all bring their own flags from the country, because he worked in a very diverse schools with kids who are immigrants from all over the world. And so he had him bring in those flags, and he actually took the effort. Either he did or it was another teacher, and he was talking about the teacher, took the effort to bring in poetry that represented each of the countries of the kids who are there. And so in doing so, he is allowing the kids, first he's connecting with the kids by saying their country of origin matters. And then he's going, so immediately along with the flags and everything, there's a sense of belonging. Then what was neat is he had the parents come in and read the poetry in their native tongue. So it was an opportunity for him to actually be introduced to the parents, and also for the kids in the classroom to be introduced to the family of each of the students, therefore creating this incredibly wonderful elevated sense of community. And again, coming back to that sense of belonging, which you're going to hear me parrot over and over again as being such an integral part of education. If you don't feel you don't belong, you won't learn. So how do we create that sense of belonging? So right there is a challenge that I'm gonna put a pain point for a lot of school administrators. How do I get the teachers to consciously create a sense of belonging for all of their students inside of the classroom. Not everyone has the resources or the time, like Janine did, to go visit. I remember Dr. ABC saying that he gutted his classroom and rebuilt it out to the design of the students. So he actually brought in the students, said, what kind of space do you want to have here? He took it down to, he gutted it. He said, this is our classroom. What do we want it to look like? What do we want it to feel like? And they started bringing in their opinion to help create that sense of belonging. But not everybody has that resources. You know, you're talking to a school administrator, it's like, yeah, okay, I can't go in, I don't have the budget to go in and gut a classroom and build it out to the specs of the students in that classroom. So that could be a substantial pain point. So I would say getting your, let's start with kind of recapping, getting your staff on board, of course. I would say even going back to getting your staff to embrace their own ignorance first, and their own judgment. If they're in the judgment stage, the ignorant stage, the judgment stage, the minimizing stage, in those stages, we're not going to have any success. We're going to be at loggerheads here to be able to move further on to actually get to a place of bridging those, seeing the differences and finding value in those differences. So so I think that's in order to do that and create that sense of belonging, the hurdles we have, of course, are getting your staff on board with it, getting your staff who have the availability of time and resources to involve the family one way or another, either going out to visit them or to bring them into the classroom. How do we create a sense of belonging inside of classroom when we have a very limited budget? Which I can tell you, my dad was a school administrator, and it was always, I would love to do this if I had the budget. And so that requires, though, a lot of, interestingly enough, cultural creativity, because you have to start pulling resources from the people who are in the classroom.
And I will add, not just budget, it's time, right? And I think a lot of, I think in a high school level, we're so the curriculum's so jam packed, it's not included, so it's not even part of the curriculum, but I got to jam it in somehow. And I think even if we step a little bit further, I'll go back to the challenge that you mentioned in the introduction, which is a lot has to do with self-awareness, right? So I might not know myself where I'm at in that journey if I'm a leader and administrator, or I might not even know where my staff is on that journey. So I'm curious, what are some of what are other challenges that administrators or schools, educators, or those at the system level need to be aware of as they're thinking about, okay, I know I need to address this, that we haven't even been having these discussions yet, but what I'm hearing is it needs to start with myself. And so what are some of the challenges that you kind of have seen others kind of grapple with, those that are starting to become aware that, we need to do something about this, I need to start creating initiatives, but I'm hearing that it starts with myself, and what are some areas of opportunities or challenges that we should make people aware of as they're starting this journey? Curious to hear what you have to say about that.
Well, the science is clear. All of my work and my trainings and my books are backed up by neuroscience, because I'm big on the brain. And so they did a research of, okay, well, what are the best leadership strategies? And when you think about the classroom, the teacher is the lead learner, right? The leadership authority position. And they look at all of these models, leadership models. And the leadership model that one is based on the self-fulfilling prophecy, meaning the leader's expectation is a huge force on the student or the team member, if you're in the workforces, success more than anyone thought. And so if I'm going into a classroom and I don't like, I don't like to use real examples, but if I have a bias against, a particular demographic without even knowing it.
You have a bias against me.
Okay, I have a bias against Meghan's demographics, or for whatever. So without even knowing it, I'm not directly it's not a hatred thing. It's just because a bias, the subconscious, has been paired. I've seen Meghan's demographic paired with negative images for the past 10 years. So my brain is operating from that lens without even being aware of it. So I am going to have a self-fulfilling prophecy of Meghan that's much lower as opposed to a student who I'm maybe even better connected with. We have more similarities, and it's really interesting how this plays out. And I've seen it firsthand, where a teacher may have a bias against a particular demographic, and you see them. And if a teacher expects a student to do well, and subconsciously they'll put it there. So one of the challenges that I want to focus on is it's hard for humans to say, I need to do work. I may have an unconscious belief that is harming my students and even harming myself, because it affects our creativity. We're not as curious, right? We're not taking an initiative to learn. And also ego is a huge trip up. Positions. You're going to see a huge shift in leadership within the next decade of more training on situational humility, right? More training on empathy, more training on these quote unquote soft skills. I call them professional skills, or they're critical skills, but because ego, I'm going to write a chapter in the book called Ego is the Enemy of Your Creativity, because if your ego is there, I'm the teacher and you learn from me, and don't correct me in front of people, and don't make me look bad in front of people. If that is, guiding your classroom culture, you don't have psychological safety, which is connected to belonging. People can't, challenge you and learn how to have good discourse and question. The kids don't speak up, and so they're stunted in their growth, and because of the ego there. But it takes a mature person to say, I may have an ego problem. How do I work on this, and how do I dismantle it for the success of my students? So that's a huge trip up of the awareness, and giving teachers training on how to work through that so their students can be successful.
I would add in one more thing here, is that this entire journey is uncomfortable. I've done it. I'm still doing it. And I have been in, so we all are on Clubhouse, and I have this app that's an audio-based app. And I have been in rooms that have been very difficult for me to hear stories in, just opinions that I immediately can feel inside are causing discomfort. And I have, over time, said to myself enough times, when I'm uncomfortable, I'm learning. And it doesn't also mean that I'm agreeing, but I'm definitely learning. Okay, so I think that's like a starting point that we have to provide for everybody, which is, when you're uncomfortable, instead of seeing it as a time to start shutting down the conversation, let it go for a little. I've always said, on Danny Bauer's podcast, he asked me this question: how long do you let it go for somebody to, when you're an administrator and you're trying to get somebody on board and they're not in agreement with you? How long do you let it go on as you try to negotiate with them? Because you're an administrator, you're tight on time, right? How long do you let it go on? I said, long enough that you're uncomfortable with it. That's always a cue for me, is when I'm trying to listen to people, I try to listen long enough to be uncomfortable, so that I know at some point I've broken that little barrier, that I've stopped listening.
I love it. So hopefully we all become uncomfortable a little bit. We all became uncomfortable as we're thinking about, and hopefully you did the exercise, folks, and thinking about what the challenges are. And some of them might be, very personal. And it could be some biases that you might be holding that you need to be aware of. And that in itself is uncomfortable. And being open to discussing it poses another one, and especially when you consider the culture of your school and how bringing that topic up might make others feel uncomfortable. So I love that we're started with the challenges, but let's transition and let's start thinking about. I know, Megan, you started teasing as well, some of the solutions and the strategies, because I think this is what a lot of us are looking for. And I don't think this is a quick fix. Just do this 1, 2, 3, and you're done. That's not how this works. But we can definitely share some ways and get started. And so before we get into that, and of course, we want to kind of start thinking about, or how we should start thinking about, or examples that perhaps will start shaping our mind around how others have done this. And of course, folks, this is a personal journey. So all of you that are watching this right now, this is something that you have to contextualize for your own classrooms, for your own schools, for your own systems. And so the best way that you approach this is by hearing these scenarios, but then by having a discussion with those in your education ecosystem to start sharing ideas with each other. And that's what we're going to do next. But Meghan, why don't you prime us with some thoughts, and then Janine will have you remind us again of some of what are those kind of key ideas of what success looks like as we start shifting our mind from, okay, here's the challenges, but now how do we start constructing and co-constructing new solutions and new ideas to go forward? So Meghan, you can kick us off.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm going to go back to my example about Dr. ABC. So he joined the school. He had fresh out of having his PhD, and he was told by the principal that he could have any class that he wanted. And a lot of teachers in that position would be like, "Oh, good. Okay, give me the high performing kids. I want to do an AP class, because it's going to be a smaller class. They're going to be more invested." And he said, "I want all the kids who can't read." And they're like, okay. So they created a class for kids who couldn't read. And we're talking about like at the middle school level right now. And so he created this classroom by getting their input, and he made it the place that they wanted to be. It became the place, in fact, that kids wanted to go to who could read. It was just the layout of it, the feeling of it, the music that they would play. He would do anything to inspire these kids to read. And when it became the place to be and a cool place to be, everyone wanted to get. And now you have integration, and now you have kids who are helping other kids learn how to read. But I love this quote. I'm going to read to you from the podcast. He said, "Do educational leaders have the moral courage to create belonging in our classrooms? Because when you create space for people who the system is currently not created for, you will get pushback." And I know I said that earlier on, but I think that's something to always keep in the back of our mind, is that as we create solutions, we have to be prepared that when we present these solutions, it may not go over well at first. So, as we're coming up with this, embrace that idea and go forward with it anyway, because it is that important that we do this to help create that sense of belonging. So a couple other things he did that I thought were phenomenal, and he's just asking these questions. When you walk through a school and you see murals, almost every school has students do murals, right? Who do the murals represent? Who do the paintings that are in the walls or the pictures that are put up on the walls, who do they represent? If the murals and the pictures and the movies that on movie night, if a school has a movie night for their community, if all of these activities and all of the visuals don't represent the student body as a whole, you are not creating a place of belonging. So one school he knew about had a really high, in Canada, had a really high number of Jamaicans and people from the Caribbean. So the school actually took the Canadian, what was it, the country theme? I'm sorry, the word's escaping my mind here. The anthem, the Canadian anthem, and they put it to a reggae beat. I thought that was just so awesome. So the kids every day would listen to the Canadian anthem in a reggae beat. And the kids loved it because it was such a different take. It was still the Canadian anthem, but it was with a reggae beat. And he was just blown away by this. This was such a perfect way to integrate and to say, you matter. You belong here. We're bringing in your background into Canada. And then by involving these, bringing in the poetry, and the poems were from each of the, he found, let me list you off, he found poems from Jamaica, Nigeria, Morocco, Malaysia, India. These were all the kids in his classroom. And they brought in these the poems, and then the parents to speak in their own native language these poems. So what they were doing was he was helping the kids to learn more about themselves and each other and their backgrounds, but still meeting the Canadian curriculum. So he took a different look at how can we meet the curriculum in a way that's, because the curriculum has to be met in the public school. How can we meet it in a way that still involves the identity of the students? So that's kind of my overview. I'm a big fan, and I would definitely check out that podcast for his whole story, because he's just brilliant.
Oh, I love it. So the first thing I took away was not acting is not a solution, right? So moving forward, acting, even if there's a lot of criticism, even there's an uncomfort, that's the first step. But I love the beauty of those both the mural and the anthem, because it's about as a system leader, if you work at a variety of schools, it's taking a walk through your schools, watching and listening. What do you hear in the morning announcements? Are the different cultures being represented, either in the music or in the opening prayers or the opening rituals that you have? What's on the wall? Is it representative of the community that you're serving? And there's some jurisdictions, it's so vast, the spread of the schools, and so you can be as far north as serving some communities, and say in Ontario here, it's our Aboriginal communities, and you go further down south and you can serving a completely different set of communities. So standardizing for all your schools is not what it needs to look like. And so beautiful things for us to look out for. Janine, if you want to remind us, of what success looks like, and then we'll get into an exercise that we're going to encourage you to do on thinking about new ideas and strategies, but reframe for us, what does success look like? Remind us of what success looks like, because it's important when we start with, where we're at right now and some of the challenges that we're facing, kind of integrating this into our classrooms. We need to know where we want to get to, right? And oftentimes when we have that clear picture of where we want to get to, then we start thinking of creative ways and in our own context of how we might aspire to it. So I'm going to hand it back over to you to kind of remind us of that.
Well, we want to make sure our students see and feel and experience, right? That observation, observe comes from the Latin, it means to attend to. And it's not just seeing, but it's all of your senses are being touched upon and used. So our students are observing and just experiencing themselves in the curriculum and others, in their sphere, and even others that they don't even have direct contact with. And they're able to take that content, internalize it, and then make something new. The creative part is very interesting. And I wanted to expand on something that Meghan mentioned. There's a quote that I love that says, "Until the lion gets an historian, the hunter will always be the hero." And it's really important, just perspective, that I'm an integration specialist. So when I was teaching in the classroom, as a third grade teacher, I was integrating other, the arts in, other things in. And then I went into the music. I was the music director of an elementary school for over 10 years. And I was integrating the standards because I knew the academic standards. And now I integrated the academic standards into the music standards. So my brain is always looking for those, connections. The second graders, they have to learn sound waves. We're playing the recorder, sound waves, and cultural connections, very easy in integration. But I want to challenge your audience to see, and there's where the creativity comes in. Creativity is all about connecting the unconnected. That's the root of creativity, making these unobvious associations. And I wanted to just put this up and just show your audience some questions that they can ask as they're trying to integrate, because time is an issue. So they're trying to integrate this concept into their already established curriculum of, which cultures are admirable, who's seen as intelligent, who's the dominant and less dominant position, who's seen as normal, who's seen as a problem, who's seen as deficient, and which language is standard, whose religion is strange and wrong. And I know Meghan has a great story about a fox with that one, right? And who decides, who benefits, who wins, and who loses. And I love this list because it helped me take a step back and really analyze the curriculum that I was contracted to teach. And so I'm an arts advocate. I really believe the arts are just, when you talk about culture and ethnic culture, national culture, when you look in the past, a big way cultures communicate their ideas, their beliefs, and their values is through the arts, right? It's through the literature, the poems, the music, the theatrical pursuits, what we have from them. And so I want to also challenge your listeners to see how you can integrate the cultures with the arts, not just the arts, but that is a great first way to make that introduction to your students.
I love it. And I also noticed there, that list that you put up, right? So I'm responsible for, procuring all of our textbooks, right, for elementary schools, or I'm in charge of all of the curriculum and actually internalizing it or adapting it to our platform. And so, when we look through your list of questions, like this is a fantastic list to take into to our meetings. If I'm at a school system, and these are the questions and the dialogues that we need to have with one another. So I love this as a strategy. And, this is where at this point, I want all of you, if you're watching this post, I want you to hit pause, because this is the part where, as a group and as a team, within your school or within your school system, you want to start asking yourselves, okay, so now I've got the right priming there. I've got to set the stage. We understand what our challenges are. How do we start becoming creative? How do we start figuring out the actions that we can see ourselves taking within our schools to start improving cultural integration, right? And, use that list that you just saw. Those are the questions. Those are the question starters and the primers. And what I'm going to invite Janine and Meghan to do, and we'll just have a brief discussion on this right now, is what are some other ideas? And we've heard some ideas from Meghan already. What are other ideas that you've seen that have been great examples that other people can kind of leverage as starters to start immediately starting to integrate cultural integration? We heard some great examples already, but what are others that come to mind so that folks can use those as their piggyback as they're doing this exercise? So I'll hand it back to both of you.
I would say the very first step, talk to your kids. Talk to the students, involve the students, because again, I'm gonna the cultural creativity, which is what Janine is such an expert in, and mine is in the belonging. How do we create a sense of belonging? And that's why we pair well together, because you can't have one without the other. So, but to get that sense of belonging, you have to involve the people you're trying to teach. So if you're going to assemble a task force to talk about how do we integrate more cultural creativity into our school system, you better have some students and a nice diverse group of students on that committee to discuss that and to have input on that.
And I love going after Meghan, because she's just sets me up so well. And the research shows that the number one indicator of a highly creative person is openness to experience. And the number one indicator of a highly culturally competent person is openness to people with different lived experiences. So as an educator who really wanted to really get this down in my classroom and walk the walk and walk my talk, I have to be open to experiences. So I looked, number one, exactly what Meghan said, connect with my students, connect with their family, connect with their community. There's other resources in their community. Some of my students don't even leave their community. So I wanted to see what was surrounding them and what was helping encase their belief systems and their lived experiences. So I actually lived in their community for a while. And then the other thing is, for educators, I'm really big on grants and scholarships and free trips and learning and being around people. And in my book, that's not out yet, it's going to be out in the fall, The 7 Gems of Intercultural Creativity. And I'm also writing a second book geared towards education. But the National Endowment for Humanities has wonderful summer trips for teachers to go on for free. And you go to just different places. But the thing about that is not you learn about the content that they're teaching you, but you're around other people who you would not normally have access to. And sometimes I would enroll in like the China history of the dynasty, and there's only high school teachers in there, and then they come to me and like, wait, you teach kindergarten? Why are you here? I'm here because I'm open to experience, and I'm going to do a creative task of seeing how can I connect this content to my kids, because I don't want my students to think every Asian person is Chinese. That's on me. If that's the case, then that's on me. That's my fault. So how can I do the work even during my free time? The summer, we love our summer, but I took a week or two and I traveled around the country and eventually the world. Costa Rica, my husband and I went to Japan and Korea. And Hilton sent me to Korea for free, by the way. If you look for opportunities, they are there. And I'll be sure to give you those links in case you want to add them to your list.
I found out this really interesting service. I can't remember the name of it. I'm going to have to look it up because I'll probably be putting it on my website. There's a company where if you fly out, you have to pay for the trip to their resort, and it's a really nice resort. Your entire stay for the whole week is free. All of your room and board is free. The only thing you have to do is engage, I think it's 4 hours of discussion as in your native tongue, which is, would be English. This is in a country where people want to learn English. So the other clients pay to come in and speak to you, and you're not allowed to speak to them in their language. You have to only speak English. But what do you talk about? You talk about each other, and you talk about your different cultures. And I thought, this sounds like a great vacation. You go and you make a whole group, a whole cohort of friends, and you are all talking together and learning about each other and learning about the culture of their land. And they're asking you questions about the culture from where you're from. And it's free because you're helping them. They want to better their English. Isn't that an amazing thing? And I was just thinking, as you were saying, these trips, there are trips that are available like this that are, I mean, really, it's just for the cost of the plane ticket, and you're able to go there. So there are a lot of options that are available for getting out into the world and learning about other cultures so that you can start to open up and see those differences that will help you bridge that gap.
Oh, and I love that. Because oftentimes you think, oh, what curriculum or what program are we going to have, or what consultant are we bringing in to do this for us? It starts with us, and I love that you reminded us that what are the experiences that we're putting in front of our staff. What are the experiences that we're putting in front of ourselves, so that we can, like you said in the beginning, right? It starts with the self. And I just love those opportunities. And now there's going to be a lot of administrators or educators like, yes, we're going on trips with their schools.
Yeah, and I would add to that, you as the administrator, you as the superintendent, you as the principal, you as the vice principal, you have to actually go out and do these things yourself. You have to model what you're asking of your staff. That's when you're doing that is when they look and go, okay, well, she's doing it, he's doing it. I think I can do it too.
And I think as this COVID days are upon us, many are craving to get out. But also, you don't have to get on a plane and have these experiences. There's many ways just in your own backyard or a little short drive away to do these. So, but I think the spirit of what we're sharing is there. So many great ideas and examples shared. Folks, I hope you really took the time to do the exercise with your staff and with others in your community. And you've used this as an experience for that. I want to thank Janine and Meghan so much for priming us and taking us through this journey. And this is just the beginning, folks. And I want to hand it back to I'll hand it to Meghan and then to Janine to share with you other ways in which you can continue this process, continue this journey. There's lots of experiences coming up. So, I want to thank both of you for this. Meghan, I'm going to start with yourself. Let everybody know other ways in which they can continue this journey and this process.
Sure, thank you. I think the key thing is to reach out to people who are not like you. And start in your community. There are going to be people in your community. And if you have a community of a very specific demographic, get on platforms that will introduce you to other people. That's one of the reasons I love Clubhouse, because when I'm on that app, I am literally talking to people in that moment from around the globe about education. Because as you know, Giancarlo, there's some incredible educational rooms on Clubhouse. Start listening to podcasts that have interviews with people from different places around the world, different approaches. Giancarlo, your own program, Catalyst, it's about bringing people together from all around the world to discuss things and bring their lived experiences and their cultural experiences. When my database is up online, I'll be notifying people that at culturaled.net. And once we have enough people, thank you, at culturaled.net, we will be making that searchable. We're in the collection phase right now, but that's going to be a searchable database for cultural educators, for cultural centers, for diversity, equity, and inclusion experts. Janine's already enlisted on it. So it will be a great resource for connecting with people who, if you I need an outside perspective of a very specific demographic, you'll be able to find that in this database. So so check it out. But also through Giancarlo and I are running a program in like 2 weeks, I think, which is going to be about informal education, which is how to bring the power of out of school education into the school through stories and games. And that's another great way to integrate culture, is through stories, bringing cultural stories into the environment and through games and even cultural games. And I could fill up an entire discussion just on cultural games. So thank you. And on to Janine.
There we go. I am at Cafe Strategies, and we have just training programs, keynotes, wonderful programs that supports education schools, and also not just training for teachers so they can be more culturally competent and aware of their cultural lenses that they're bringing into the classroom, but that administrators could train their whole organization, because you really want your whole organization to be in sync with this. And once again, creativity is now the #1 skill needed in the workforce. So being creative with that, with your team members, but also with your educators to be creative with their students is going to be key moving forward. So we have trainings there. We also are administrated to give the Intercultural Development Inventory, which is an assessment that shows you where you are on the continuum, and it gives you a plan to show you things you could do to increase your intercultural competence. A lot of what Meghan just listed as far as just exposing yourself and examining your own self-progress in this area. I'll also be the opening keynote for the National Superintendents Forum in Texas in September 19, 2021 in San Antonio, Texas. My first time in San Antonio, but I'll be speaking to over 70 to 80 superintendents from around the nation about intercultural creativity and how can we make that shift from all the way from the superintendent all the way down to your pre-K student. How can we all make that shift? Because like Meghan mentioned, this is a complete journey of everyone, right? So how can we all make that shift and to be more culturally competent and more unified diversity? That's what I'm sharing it as, unified diversity. So I'll be happy to talk to you more about that. Just reach out to me. I'm on all the social platforms at Genein Letford.
There you go, folks. And, if you're a superintendent listening in on this and haven't found out about that, let us know. Our team is hosting it. They're great partners of Catalyst. So we'll love to get you connected. And of course, we'll all send you a notification of that next event Meghan was mentioning. And of course, any and all of the resources and more we'll be sending to you in a follow-up to this session. So be sure to look out for that email. And if you found us on socials, of course, you can connect with us at Catalyst and just subscribe. And we'd love to make these other opportunities available to you and as well get you connected in a global community, because it's really when we get together as a global community to share with each other our insights, our experiences, and our ideas, and we co-construct new ones together. That's how we create an impact for the millions of kids that come after us. So it's been a pleasure having both of you here today, hopefully engaging you in having a discussion and a dialogue. And we look forward to seeing how you all are catalysts for the work that you do and the environments you are. So with that, I'm going to sign off. Thank you again, Janine and Meghan, and look forward to connecting with all of you again in the near future. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.